remains of some previous civilization that had existed on Atlantis were buried within this.
Atlantis, the legendary lost continent? According to the Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote about it in the 4th century BC, Atlantis was an island in the Atlantic that was home to a highly advanced civilization that was wiped out by a great flood.
When you learn to walk, you learn to talk, darling. You learn how to keep yourself together, darling. When you talk about God, you talk about with honestly and brutally. You talk about your life with Him, because trust me, when I talk to God, He talks to me about the world I live in. You ever wonder what it's like to live with your one himself and be with something greater than yourself? Have you ever allowed your mind to the infinite feed you're currently streaming on? Live across the universe, doing it right now. It is the universe doing this exact beat of what I'm talking about right now.
When the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx were aligned with the constellations of both Orion and Leo.
I'm the supreme deity.
This was the same
I'm
era
on that
that was
fucking
described
island.
in ancient writings as Egypt's so-called Golden Age.
What island are you on, deity?
A time in Egyptian prehistory when the god Osiris had come down to earth from the stars.
You're a goddess, so your mind shouldn't even teach me music right now.
From the walls of different temples
I do what I want, darling.
that tell of
No one's ever caught me. I know how to move around your ears that you need.
Actually enter into Egypt
And I learned how to tell you better than anyone.
That becomes a part.
Don't you get it? Grace don't exist, darling. Aliens don't exist.
The first enclosure, the first temple.
We would have seen them by now.
And various other strange structures.
I saw them.
Which
I'm doing with the whiteboard in the video. I filmed them multiple times and posted my life multiple times. No one's ever made a comment or even I even tried to let the police know I've been visited by aliens. And they hung up on me yesterday. Yeah, what do you mean? Okay, if we find anything, we'll look up on it. Okay, bye. And I sent them an email with a link on it that shows the video.
Two of the tunnels Casey's visioned were indeed discovered.
And it says,
One
we see for the first time.
And another directly below.
Your page was that?
But mainstream Egyptologists continue to insist these tunnels were made long after the Sphinx was constructed. As we look at the Sphinx today, with magic, we believe in
I know this like this about a year now. Well, I don't know, about 6 months ago. It probably was on me the whole time. I didn't know it. The first time when I did it, I heard someone's voice. I was like, hey, kid, what are you doing here? Kid, how's the video? Kid, get out. I was like, what the fuck? And next, you know, I was in my headphones. I didn't realize it. But I started playing with it. And that's when I'm like alone.
Of 2,500-year-old pottery proof that the tunnels beneath the Sphinx were made at the same time. Ancient astronaut theorists say no and argue that artifacts.
The greatest love story ever told was a love story never told between the boy and his galaxy and the boy trying to find home. The boy born by the black matter in space, and he called it and couldn't figure out why he couldn't call it again. And then he started reading articles here of people using antibodies and knowing that you can't get dark matter. You can't get it mental-minded from space and be done. So how they're testing everything people's bodies.
Saqqara, Egypt. This ancient
if you call it, you should be able to call it at will.
15 miles south of the Giza Plateau. Is home to what mainstream archaeologists suggest is the first pyramid ever built in Egypt.
He hasn't conquered life.
The step pyramid of King Joseph.
Why would God's kids be born dead and come alive later?
The complex is
That means he's
vast, about
cheating
40
them.
acres,
He's
entirely
cheating
walled
all these people out of
There's a
chance
30-foot wall with 13 false doors. You only get in if you know where the right door is.
No, you're
Curiously,
cheating.
the only reason why the pyramid is believed to have been built as a tomb
All
for
the
King
belief patterns
Joseph
led to him.
is that statues of the monarch were found inside the pyramid. Like all other pyramids, there was no credible evidence that a body was ever entombed there.
And he
Now,
actually starts
this
to answer.
pyramid
I
is
don't know what he not
5,000
even
years old.
changed in the
That's
answer.
amazing. So, is
Based
all
on
of this
someone
made
else
out
to
of
be
the
with
mud brick? Correct. This was all made of mud brick, just similar to that era. The link
Why is it?
between this and then the Great Pyramid of Giza was massive.
In recent years, the conventional notion that the step pyramid was built only 80 years earlier than the Great Pyramid of Giza has been challenged, not only by ancient astronaut theorists, but also an increasing number of archaeologists and scholars. They believe that the likelihood that Egyptians went from building a 200-foot tall step pyramid out of mud bricks to building a monumental marvel like the Great Pyramid in only 80 years to be a virtual absurdity. They also believe that the mathematical precision of the Great Pyramid's construction, coupled with its precise alignments, not only with regard to Earth's cardinal directions, but also to the Orion constellation, is proof that it was built by a highly advanced civilization.
One of the things you find, for example, is that if you take the geodetic location of the Great Pyramid as a decimal degree,
Mathematics.
it creates a string of numbers to match the same numbers as the speed of light traveling through space, measured in meters per second.
Space.
Another thing we find as well is that if you pass the Great Circle from the Great Pyramid through its cardinal and its ordinal directions, what you find is that these circles will pass through more landmass of the Earth than any other location on the Earth. You find that the Great Pyramid is essentially located at the centre of the world's landmass. I personally think that Egyptologists, they've got something wrong somewhere. It's as simple as that. They need to put this evidence aside, step back a bit, and just look at these monuments afresh.
According to ancient astronaut theory, the Great Pyramid was most likely built more than 12,000 years ago, some 7,000 years before the building of the Step Pyramid, and sometime before the cataclysmic event known as the Great Flood. They also believe that after the flood, the original function of the Great Pyramid as a power plant was long forgotten, along with all of mankind's other technological achievements. And that it would take a series of interventions by other extraterrestrial visitors to help humans rebuild the world they once knew.
In the text that we can read about Joseph, does he mention at all how he was inspired to build this?
There was one brilliant man. That man was called Imhotep,
Okay.
who in history came out of nowhere. He was the designer and the engineer of that pyramid.
What does Imhotep actually mean?
It means, I know you're like this, it means I come in peace.
Really? That's very interesting. So the extraterrestrial greeting, so to speak.
Yes. He showed up into the life of the king out of nowhere, and then ascended into position so quickly, which is very uncommon in ancient Egypt.
What does that mean? What do you mean out of nowhere? Did he drop from the sky, or did he come from another land?
In Egyptian history, you can normally trace every position back to their parents, but in Imhotep, nothing.
Imhotep was a commoner, but a brilliant thinker who grew to great influence during the time of the pharaohs that he served, and then became virtually immortalized. That is, unlike any other commoner, a cult formed around him. Some have suspected that he was possibly Joseph from the Bible. That's interesting because Joseph was an advisor to Pharaoh in about the same period of time. What we know for sure is that he was a brilliant scientist for his day.
Imhotep rose to the incredible status as the vizier or wizard to the pharaoh. This is where we get that word wizard from, vizier. There are great mysteries about who Imhotep was, where he came from. This is interesting because later on, Imhotep is deified.
What was fascinating is the depictions of him. He looks like he's got this oversized head. He's got strange-looking hands. He almost looks non-human. And one of the extraordinary texts tell us that his knowledge may have come from the stars.
Did Imhotep himself ever mention where he was educated or how he came by the knowledge of building something like this, for example?
In ancient Egyptian history, Imhotep spoke like a true ancient Egyptian, and everything he has, his beauty, his knowledge, and everything he has is from the gods.
Do we know how long he lived?
That is also a mystery. We don't know how he died, but he was buried in the tomb. And that tomb was around here in Saqqara. The tomb of Imhotep has never been found
So far, right?
so far. But look around you, the desert is massive. When the tomb of Imhotep is discovered, it will be the discovery of this century.
If the tomb of Imhotep is discovered, will it provide further evidence that ancient Egyptian legends of gods descending to Earth from the constellation of Orion are based on fact? Perhaps. But until that day comes, there are many who believe that proof of humankind's extraterrestrial ancestry already exists in the form of curiously carved pyramid-shaped objects known as Ben stones.
This is it, Giorgio. One of the many Ben stones or pyramids inside the museum.
Look at it. It's absolutely magnificent. And it's perfect. I mean, if you look at it, there's not a single mistake anywhere. Just wonderful. I'm familiar with the stories of the Ben, and I'm fascinated that sometimes it was described as this shape descending from the sky with a lot of smoke and a lot of fire. And then a door opened and people walked out. So to me, as a mythology, that is fascinating because where did that story originate?
Yes.
According to mainstream Egyptologists, the story of the Ben stone is part of a religious allegory conceived by ancient Egyptians to explain how humankind was created. But according to ancient astronaut theorists, the stone is based on an actual historical event, one that predates the building of the Great Pyramid by thousands of years.
So when I hear a story like the Ben stone, I wonder if this may have been some type of a craft. Egyptologists agree that this type of a shape descended from the sky in a giant fireball, made a controlled landing, the Ben stone opened, and people walked out. The first creator gods. In my opinion, I think these gods were flesh and blood space travelers whom the ancient Egyptians and many other ancient cultures misinterpreted as divine or spiritual beings because of their technological frame of reference of their current time. This ties in directly with the idea of misunderstood technology. When a technologically primitive society interacts with a technologically advanced society, the primitive society begins to worship the advanced society. I've once read that a Ben stone can also be considered the home of the gods. Yes, from my perspective, then that would be proof of extraterrestrial intervention. Right here, this is a physical piece of evidence that a long time ago, someone descended from the sky and taught mankind in various disciplines.
If the original Ben stone was inspired by an actual alien spacecraft, as many ancient astronaut theorists believe, does the legend surrounding it further suggest that Egypt was one of the centers of extraterrestrial activity on our planet? Ancient astronaut theorists say the answer is a profound yes. And they suggest that further evidence can be found, not by examining ancient Egyptian scrolls and hieroglyphs, but by carefully reading the pages of the Holy Bible. Cairo, Egypt, the 14th century AD. Egyptian historian al-Makrizi begins work on a series of writings that propose that the history of the Giza Plateau dates back much further than what is accepted by the mainstream historians of his day. He has concluded that the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx were not constructed in 2500 BC, but thousands of years earlier by a king named Saurid.
Now, according to usual knowledge, we believe that the Great Pyramid was constructed by the fourth dynasty, more or less 2,500 years from now. But all Arabian traditions, for example, Ibrahim Abdullah al-Masudi, they say that the Great Pyramid was constructed by a ruler, his name was Saurid. And they say Saurid is the same which the Hebrew called Enoch. Now, Arabian tradition says Enoch plus Methuselah constructed the Great Pyramid.
Enoch, the same Enoch who was written about in one of the so-called lost chapters of the Bible, who supposedly was taken up to heaven by angels called watchers in order for him to observe the human race? Could he really have been the same person who was responsible for the building of the Great Pyramid more than 12,000 years ago?
The Book of Enoch is a text that is believed to have been written by the Essenes, Jewish mystics, sometime between the 3rd and 2nd century BC. And in the story, they tell how one of the watcher angels, the archangel Michael,
constructed the Great Pyramid.
Enoch, the same Enoch who was written about in one of the so-called lost chapters of the Bible, who supposedly was taken up to heaven by angels called watchers in order for him to observe the human race? Could he really have been the same person who was responsible for the building of the Great Pyramid more than 12,000 years ago?
The Book of Enoch is a text that is believed to have been written by the Essenes, Jewish mystics, sometime between the 3rd and 2nd century BC. And in the story, they tell how one of the watcher angels, the archangel Michael, came to earth and took Enoch into the heavenly realms, to the throne of God, where Enoch is educated by the angels and given an opportunity to return to earth to share the accumulated knowledge that he received. It's very similar to what we see in the pyramid text, where the pharaoh is taken into the stellar realm, where his body becomes like lightning, where the doors of heaven are open, and where a human then can be educated by the gods.
Are the so-called pyramid texts and the Hebrew Bible's apocryphal Book of Enoch both referencing the same period in prehistory? A period where extraterrestrial beings, referred to as gods, ruled the earth. Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and believe further evidence can be found by closely examining ancient texts concerning a race of angels that are referred to as the Watchers.
In the Bible, there's a very curious passage that speaks about the sons of God who came down from heaven to the daughters of men as brides, from which came forth the mighty ones. They came down with knowledge. Knowledge which we today would understand as technology and science. And they became corrupt and made matters worse, not better. And this is what led to God's decision to bring the flood.
According to the Book of Enoch, the Watchers were sent by God in order to help mankind on earth. But after a number of these watchers had sex with human women and produced children in the form of giant mutants known as the Nephilim, God caused a great flood that was intended to destroy them, along with all those who disobeyed His will.
Our main knowledge of the Nephilim comes not just from the Bible, but also from the Book of Enoch and also the so-called Book of Giants. The Book of Giants says that they were destroyed in a cataclysm that not only involved a deluge, but also fire that came out of the sky. And I think that we can connect the story with what we call the Younger Dryas comet impact event that took place around 10,800 BC, that is known to have had a massive effect upon the Northern Hemisphere at this time.
If, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, the foundations of ancient biblical and Egyptian texts are not based on mere imagination, but on actual historical events, then it serves to strengthen their contention that the roots of ancient Egypt stretch back far earlier than currently believed by mainstream scholars and archaeologists.
Archaeology is rooted in interpretation, just like the ancient astronaut theory. I'm still of the personal opinion that the Great Pyramid complex, including the Sphinx, dates back to a time when the gods walked among humans. Something extraordinary happened right here in ancient Egypt, perhaps under the tutelage of extraterrestrials, teachers from another star system.
If extraterrestrials and giant hybrid beings really did inhabit Egypt thousands of years before the first human pharaohs, could physical proof lie hidden within the mysterious void recently discovered inside the Great Pyramid? Or could it be found elsewhere in the form of 24 stone coffins buried deep beneath the desert sands? Saqqara, Egypt, 1850. While on an expedition to recover ancient manuscripts for the Louvre Museum in Paris, French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette spots a strange object sticking out of the sand. Intrigued, Mariette has the sand cleared away and finds large rocks blocking what looks to be the entrance to an underground chamber. After using explosives to remove them, he gains entrance to a tomb complex, also known as the Serapeum.
The Serapeum of Saqqara, Georgia. It's magnificent. The name Serapeum comes from Serapis, which is Apis bull and Osiris, combined together in one Greek god. This is one of the most mysterious places in all of Egypt, Giorgio. Look how far all this goes.
Located deep beneath the desert surface lies a 700-foot-long passageway. There, located in a series of alcoves, neatly carved out of the limestone rock, are 24 gigantic stone sarcophagi, perfectly constructed from solid granite, and each weighing roughly 100 tons, the equivalent of 55 mid-sized automobiles.
The boxes themselves are, 70 to 75 tons? And then the lids are estimated to be 20 to 25 tons.
It's one of the most mysterious things about this place is really how they managed to bring these heavy structures all the way down here when we're breathing heavily just to get to the end.
Can we actually go down to some of these?
Of course we can.
Wow. I've always read about these, I've seen pictures, but it's humongous. You can walk underneath it.
Each sarcophagus measures 13 feet long, 7.5 feet wide and over 10 feet tall. But just how the ancient Egyptians managed to transport these massive granite boxes remains unknown, as does their intended purpose. As far as conventional Egyptologists and archaeologists are concerned, the sarcophagi were meant to house the remains of the sacred Apis bowls. But as only one of the tombs was found to contain animal remains, and all the others were found empty, the true nature of the Serapeum is a source of deep contention as far as ancient astronaut theorists are concerned.
The Apis bull is a representation for god Osiris. And there's something very important to mention. Ancient Egyptians did not worship animals. Their concept was the gods sent the animals to be their messengers, and we have to respect them in that way.
Based on an artifact from the 4th millennium BC called the Bull Palette, some Egyptologists believe worship of the Apis bull dates back at least 6,000 years.
It was said that the first ever Apis bowl was created when a ray of light came down from heaven itself and struck this cow who produced the first Apis bowl. So there is some relationship between the bull itself and the stars. Those bulls were said to have the markings of a falcon on their back, as well as a diamond on the forehead and the scarab beneath the tongue, all of which were symbols of the sky world, all of which indicate that here we have a place of contact with the other world itself. And the greatest mystery to do with this bowl is the Serapeum.
The sides and also here at the bottom, the polishing is perfect. And we can illustrate this by just looking at the angle. I mean, it's a perfect 90-degree angle. Check this out. It is absolute perfection. It's easy to cut limestone, but to cut basalt is, that's a different story. What do these inscriptions here say?
These inscriptions were extremely important. You see the doors, specifically the so-called false doors. They were the doors that allowed the spirits, the Ka and the Ba, the spirits and the soul, to come out from the mummy and then read the hieroglyphic inscriptions. They wanted to make sure that these Apis bulls come back to life, go to eternity, so they could stay with Osiris in the sky.
Ancient historians' accounts like Herodotus, Strabo, Eusebius, all of these old chroniclers speak of a former glory age of Egypt known as the Golden Age, which some have suggested dates back as far as 10,500 BC. So is it possible that what we have right here may be a remnant of that time?
When it comes to dating, I don't have a response.
As far as ancient astronaut theorists like Georgios Tsoukalos are concerned, the fact that only one of the 24 sarcophagi found in the Serapeum contain animal remains, the same one that features crude, almost graffiti-like hieroglyphic carvings, is evidence that archaeologists are mistaken in their belief that this magnificent complex was built as a burial site for sacred bulls.
It's a huge discrepancy in workmanship, especially with what we've seen in other examples of hieroglyphs carved or inscribed on other basalt items. It leads me to think that whoever inscribed this box right here, they came much later.
I can't tell you for a fact that this was made 3,000 years ago. Till today, there's a debate on when were these made.
It is Georgios' belief that not only was the Serapeum built more than 10,000 years ago, back to the time when the Great Pyramid was constructed, but that it was likely built to house the remains not of bulls, but of giant extraterrestrial beings.
It is a fact that when most of these gigantic sarcophagi were opened, nothing was inside them. And in my opinion, I think that this acted as some kind of otherworldly environment for communication with the cosmos itself.
These things may well have been created by extraterrestrials. Later, the Egyptians took them over, used them as sarcophagi, perhaps for these bulls.
I mean, I find it wild that this place was even discovered.
And there's probably much more to be discovered here in Saqqara, and we never know what we're going to find.
Absolutely.
Could it be that the Serapeum of Saqqara was originally built as a repository for extraterrestrial remains? But if so, what happened to them? How could they have simply vanished without a trace? Ancient astronaut theorists believe one possible answer can be found by closely examining another of ancient Egypt's most compelling artifacts: mummies. In the shadow of Egypt's majestic pyramids and monuments, and beneath its ever-shifting sands, lie the tombs and resting places of more than 1 million human mummies. The bodies, often thousands of years old, are so well preserved that most are still covered in flesh.
Mummification in ancient Egypt could be extremely expensive and was a very slow process. Families in Egypt would spend their entire fortune mummifying the dead. But why were the Egyptians mummifying people and going through these elaborate mummification rituals? It would seem to be that they did want to preserve the body as best they could.
The ancient Egyptians went to great lengths to keep the bodies of their dead from decomposing. All organs, except for the heart, were extracted. The brain was pulled out through the nose. All moisture was removed from the body, and hundreds of yards of linen were used to wrap the deceased, all in preparation for what the Egyptians believed to be the afterlife.
Jojo, this is it. The Royal Mummy's Room.
Here, in the Royal Mummies Room at the Cairo Museum, ancient astronaut theorist Georgios Tsoukalos and Egyptologist Rami Rahmani have come to examine some peculiarities concerning mummification that have been largely hidden from the public.
So tell me about mummification. Why did the ancient Egyptians mummify their dead?
Mummification was extremely important for ancient Egyptians because the concept of their religion, they believed that if they can perfectly preserve their body as is, then they can live for eternity in a different dimension in the underworld, the world of the dead. It's very interesting. The mummies that we see here, I mean, it is extraordinary the level of preservation. Absolutely.
Me? I did. Why don't you attend to use one of them? How you do use that? And you're on?
And I have to tell you,
Yeah.
still is a mystery to us. What were the ingredients needed in order to mummify a body? The first and most important ingredient in the process of mummification is the natural salt. The mummy would have to stay in the natural salt for a couple of weeks before they can go through the rest of the process. It's the driest salt there is. Because the main reason they want that salt is to take the liquid out as fast as possible from the mummy before the mummy starts rotting, to keep every part of it safe with all the liquids out.
You're not connected.
The one thing that's always fascinated me is the idea that they were mummified in order to live on in the afterlife. And the afterlife, with all the religious symbology that exists in ancient Egypt,
always had something to do with the stars.
So let's get you off
Now,
that system.
if you look at the future, one way of
So you
reaching
can do
another
it.
planet would be if we put ourselves into a state of suspended animation. And we would do this by being inside pods, sleeping like this. And so my question is, whether or not the ancient Egyptians witnessed something like this, they didn't understand that it was someone going back to their planet, putting on a suit, getting inside their sarcophagus, which looks like a pod, or the pod looks like a sarcophagus. So it's not symbolic at all, but in fact they witnessed something and misinterpreted it as a spiritual event. The origin of it may have been rooted in misunderstood technology.
But I think there is a point to be made here. You are assuming that they believed that this was symbolic. But for them, it wasn't symbolic.
So this raises an interesting point that only mummies of the New Kingdom so far have been found, and
Wait, what you
no
just
one in the Old Kingdom. So where
What
have
Papa's
they
friend
gone?
talking right there?
Until recently,
Okay.
it was believed that mummification began in Egypt.
So, darling,
somewhere around
you mean you're watching me
2600
live? You're
BC.
watching me live now for change?
But in
You mean you're doing
2014,
your show live
evidence
now?
was discovered that suggested the practice could have begun thousands of years earlier, long before the time of the pharaohs. But were the bodies of the dead being preserved for a future in the afterlife, or for some other, even more incredible purpose?
I think the whole process of mummification and burial was a step of safety, a very practical method of harvesting the energy in the air to charge the body of money and transforming the whole thing into a very high power capacity.
A power capacitor, transforming the bodies of dead pharaohs into sources of energy. Could such an audacious theory be scientifically possible?
Why did they use natural salt that comes from dry beds lake instead of marine salt from the Mediterranean Sea or the Red Sea? Natural salt is very alkaline. The body will become alkaline. And they were covering it with linen with natural resins. Now that resin is acidic. In contact with the alkaline body, it will have some sort of an ion exchanger.
When we look at the mummification process in the tombs of the pharaoh, we find granite tombs. The ancient Egyptians referred to granite as a fire stone. They called it that because it's loaded with pure quartz crystal, and crystal holds vibration. When we combine this with the massive amounts of gold and other precious jewels that were used in the mummification process placed upon the body, you begin to wonder, were they trying to trigger some kind of a electrical process that somehow transmuted the body?
Maybe we're dealing with some other sort of technology here, or an ancient civilization on Earth. They were making the body vibrate, creating some sort of soul.
The reason why the ancient Egyptians mummified their pharaohs is that they were going to self-create a new white body, a new vehicle for the pharaoh's consciousness to survive. So effectively, they could continue on their journey into the stars. Our cutting-edge artificial intelligence and sci-fi-like desire to upload our consciousness into is an absolute pure reflection of the ancient Egyptian mummification concept. This idea that we can create a new vehicle for ourselves, a non-biological entity that will enable us to live as immortal beings. Could it be that with the process of mummification, the ancient Egyptians were trying to recreate a process that had been used in Egypt thousands of years earlier? that a time was inhabited by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest that a direct similarity exists between the burial practices performed on the Egyptian pharaohs and the original purpose of the stone sarcophagi in the Serapeum, the conversion of physical beings into pure energy. They also believe further evidence of extraterrestrial activity in ancient Egypt can be found by examining the hieroglyphs carved into the walls of one of the country's most elaborate and intriguing sacred sites. Was Egypt the destination for Earth's earliest extraterrestrial visitors? And if so, were the ancient pyramids, tombs, and temples actually built by ancient aliens? Or were they, perhaps, inspired by them? To find the answer, Egyptologist Rami Ramani has invited ancient astronaut theorist and researcher Andrew Collins to join him on a visit to one of the most impressive and best preserved shrines in Egypt, the Temple of Edfu, located on the west bank of the Nile, 465 miles south of Cairo.
Look at this temple. This is like my most favorite facade in all of the temples of ancient Egypt.
According to mainstream archaeologists, Edfu is believed to have been built sometime between 237 and 57 BC. It is dedicated to the falcon-headed god Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis.
This temple was one of the last temples that was ever built in ancient Egypt during the Roman time. When they built that temple, they were like, we want to preserve the stories, so let's gather all the mythology of ancient Egypt and try to put it in one temple. It took 150 years to make this happen. And then finally, we have the book of ancient Egyptian mythology. It's right in front of us on all these walls.
Every wall is absolutely covered in hieroglyphs and images, not only of the foundation of ancient Egypt and the first temple, but also how the world came into being, how Egypt came into being, how the universe was essentially founded in the first place. I mean, there's just so much here.
The most sacred part of Edfu, the Holy of Holies, is its inner sanctum, featuring a 12-foot-tall granite stone.
This is it, right here. This is how it all began. Every symbol, every text, every little drawing here represents the most sacred thing for ancient Egyptians. The question that humans now still ask themselves, how did it all begin? What created us? Like every religion talks about it. Scientists try to figure out. Ancient Egyptians had an answer. It was right there. Right on top of this is the pyramid. That pyramid is the primeval mound that appeared in the middle of the marshes where all the gods came and landed on for the first time to start creating humanity. This is the beginning of humanity.
What we have here is a focus of all of these chapels, finishing with this incredible structure, pointing towards the north. It's actually pointing towards the origins of the gods themselves. It's a way of projecting the soul back to its place of origin amongst the stars.
There's another piece of evidence here that you might like. This is the boat, or a symbol of the boat that they believed the gods came on to the first primeval stone.
So it's all here in this sanctuary. The whole story of humanity's beginning, its place in the stars and how it arrived here in the first place. This, to me, strongly suggests that they were aware that our origins are found amongst the stars. I think probably the answer is yes.
Or it could just simply be humans trying to make religions explain what science can't explain.
But I don't think it's about religion. This is about cosmology. An ancient cosmology that was believed by the ancient Egyptians, and a cosmology that we're now beginning to understand for the first time within science.
whether it be to do with astronomy, astrophysics, or quantum existence.
Are the ancient hieroglyphs, carefully inscribed on the granite stone at the Temple of Edfu, merely the fanciful notions of ancient Egyptian priests, or could they be based on actual historical events? As far as ancient astronaut theorists are concerned, they believe that extraterrestrials first came to Egypt in a pyramid-shaped spacecraft that was later referred to in the pyramid texts as the Ben stone. But once here, they may have used an even more incredible technology to travel to the stars and back, the so-called Ship of Eternity.
The story here is that Osiris, the god of resurrection, was cut into pieces. The head of Osiris was found at Abydos. When we look at the hieroglyph for the head of Osiris, it clearly resembles an electrical transformer. On the opposite wall, we see the same device attached to what is referred to as the Ark of the Millions of Years, the Ship of Eternity. The pyramid texts are replete with stories of the pharaohs flying through the cosmos. The Ship of Eternity, which they portrayed on the walls of the temples, is looking exactly like the way modern science portrays a wormhole. The ancient Egyptians believed that the human body could be transformed into a light being form that matched that of the gods. And so we have to ask, is this device some kind of a transformational device that could take the human body, turn it into a light being form perhaps, that could then travel through a wormhole to a distant star system, Orion, for example?
Does the Ship of Eternity represent a stargate through which extraterrestrials, and perhaps even humans, travel instantaneously to other parts of the universe, perhaps even back to their home planet, located somewhere in the constellation of Orion? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and they suggest that such a device may still exist today, hidden within a recently discovered void inside the Great Pyramid. An ancient Hebrew text from the 3rd century BC, entitled Exegage, attributed to the poet and playwright known as Ezekiel the Tragedian, tells the story of a strange encounter Moses had while on Mount Sinai.
Moses comes upon a noble being who's sitting on a throne. This noble being invites Moses to sit on the throne, and when he does so, this noble being gives him a crown and a scepter. Suddenly, Moses finds himself looking at the earth from space. It actually gives a description. I looked forth upon the earth's wide circle, then at my feet behold 1,000 stars. So we have to look at these ancient stories and wonder what's described. How is it possible that you put on a crown and all of a sudden you're in space?
According to the Hebrew Bible, Moses was raised as a nobleman in ancient Egypt and as the adopted son and brother of 2 powerful pharaohs. Is it possible that when he led the Israelites on their exodus into the desert, he was already in possession of secret extraterrestrial devices that would be thousands of years ahead of his time?
Today, through augmented reality and VR, we can see that our technological advances can actually extend someone into a whole new environment by placing these devices on their head. It's very possible that some of these ancient devices constructed for the pharaoh were actually extending their consciousness to another physical location, or possibly project his physical body like a stargate to some other location.
Is it possible that the biblical account of a throne, one that transported Moses to the stars, is directly connected to Dr. Giulio Mahi's theory that the recently discovered void inside the Great Pyramid could contain some sort of secret metallic transportation device? And if so, could it be the same object that the ancient Egyptians referred to as the ship of eternity? For ancient astronaut theorists, the answer is a profound yes. And they believe that the ultimate evidence of Earth's extraterrestrial past may be closer than ever before.
This place to me is ground zero for all the theories that I have investigated, and actually my resolve has strengthened in taking a secondary and a tertiary look at ancient Egypt to look at even more evidence, because I think that's incredibly important. What I've learned as well is that just the fact that you, and hopefully others, are also open-minded enough to debate and discuss the theories, which is extremely important in my opinion. That's how science actually works.
Absolutely. Look,
I agree that many of the ancient things are rooted in symbolism. However, my question is always, how or where did the symbolism originate? Many of the ancient structures were built in honor of the gods. But my question is, why and where did it begin? And above all, how? How was the religion inspired?
yes,
What inspired the religion?
yes.
And it's a great question to have, and I don't have an answer for it. We are at a crossroads
Yes.
that is about to change the future. I think we're about to enter a new era of archaeotechnology. And when archaeology and technology mix together, I think the future of Egyptology will be fascinating. I mean, think how much stuff is under the sands just right in front of you,
Yes.
right here. I 100% agree. I argue that perhaps the ancient Egyptians had access to sophisticated technology. So the fact that we today are discovering ancient sites by means of modern technology, that to me is the present meeting the past, and the past meeting the present and the future, of course.
For ancient astronaut theorists, the mysteries of the early Egyptians are perhaps best understood as an attempt by them to replicate behavior that was practiced by their ancestors thousands of years earlier, when the region served as the center of extraterrestrial activity on our planet. They also believe that new, cutting-edge technologies, like the one used to discover the mysterious void inside the Great Pyramid, will be instrumental in proving their theory. For them, the answers exist all around us. And once we discover the truth, humankind will be ready to realize its ultimate destiny. Bizarre,
They have these very strange circular eyes.
mysterious.
This pyramid almost looks like a large launch ramp on top of a platform.
Gigantic.
Look at the size of these blocks. I mean, that one right there is a minimum of 1 ton.
But are they extraterrestrial?
There was something very unusual happening on this island.
Oak Island treasure hunter Marty Lagina
The effort to create this is extraordinary.
joins ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos.
What do you think that represents?
It could be some type of a flying craft.
For a sky-high exploration of one of the most unusual places on Earth.
It's possible that Sardinia was the epicenter for giants in the ancient world.
Will Marty help Giorgio solve a centuries-old mystery?
Look at this. It's a perfect circle.
This is spectacular.
And will Marty return home convinced that aliens really do exist.
I'm literally wowed by this. Someone or someones had extraordinary knowledge.
Sardinia, Italy. Today, this Mediterranean island off the west coast of the Italian mainland is well known as the playground of the rich and famous. But 2,000 years ago, Sardinia was home to one of the most mysterious cultures in all of the ancient world.
There's actually tens of thousands of sites on that particular island, and even a pyramid. This is quite rare in Europe, so it's got a vast megalithic culture going back several thousand years. And it really is an overlooked place when it comes to archaeology.
Sardinia was once home to a very mysterious and arcane culture called the Nuragic civilization. The island is replete with the residue of megalithic constructions. All over the island, you find these megalithic stone towers called nuraghi, which were constructed sometime in the distant past. You also have the megalithic tombs of the giants.
Giants? Is it possible that Sardinia was once the home of an ancient race, strangely different from our own? But if so, where did they come from? And perhaps more importantly, where did they go? It was to find answers to these intriguing questions that ancient astronaut theorist and publisher Giorgio Tsoukalos traveled to Sardinia in May of 2018.
Giorgio, how crazy is this place?
Isn't this something?
So great to meet you here in Sardinia.
He had also taken advantage of the trip to meet up with Oak Island treasure hunter Marty Lagina, who over the years has been a frequent visitor to the island and shares Giorgio's fascination with it.
You know, I've been here the last time about 35 years ago with my parents on summer vacation.
No kidding. I'm of Italian ancestry, and I came here, I think it was 4 years ago. And I was here on an Italian language course. So in the process, I find out about these nuraghis, and I find out about these ancient things, and I find out that nobody seems to know anything about them. And very seriously, I'd like your opinion about all this stuff, right? I don't know whether this means anything, but when I was talking to some of the locals, they talk that there are a lot of legends of giants, giants.
Really?
Does that mean anything?
Absolutely, because only a few years ago, I was exploring on Malta, and there, the entire civilization is based on the idea of giants.
Really?
And some have suggested, according to the ancient astronaut theory, that when the gods descended and mated with the beautiful women of Earth, they produced giants. So every time there are stories and legends of giants, I find that very interesting.
Well, there's a lot of material here, so let's have a look.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
To begin their investigation, Giorgio and Marty traveled to the National Archaeological Museum in Cagliari, where some of Sardinia's oldest and strangest artifacts are on display.
It's just all weird. And with this helmet on, those weird eyes.
Featured in the museum's collection are a number of enormous stone statues known as the Giants of Monte Crama. They were first discovered in 1974 when a local farmer stumbled upon a large carved stone protruding from the ground. Archaeologists quickly took over the site, recovering more than 5,000 broken remnants. Mainstream historians suggest the statues were carved by the Nuragic people, a civilization that is believed to have inhabited the island for 2,000 years, emerging in 1800 BC and mysteriously disappearing around 200 AD. But what also makes the statues so mysterious is the strange way in which the faces are carved, not so much resembling humans, but what some might describe as robots.
The giant statues on Monte Promo are approximately 7.5 to 8 feet tall. You have warriors and boxers and archers. The statues themselves are just noted for their size, and it's not that they represent the neurologic people, that this is actually what we might have that looks like them.
If he's a model of that, why doesn't he have disc eyes? He doesn't have disc eyes, and he certainly could.
What I find intriguing is that the giants of Monte Promo, although they were discovered in the 1970s, were not put on display until sometime near the year 2000. And I believe that these statues simply do not conform to the conventional archaeological narrative on the island, and instead point to the reality that there was something very unusual happening on this island.
This is very human, except it has weird eyes and disproportionate proportions.
When you look at these stone figurines, they are extremely peculiar. They give the impression of actually being giants. The strange thing about the statues is that they have these very strange circular eyes that almost give them an otherworldly feel.
After their visit to the museum, Giorgio and Marty meet at a nearby restaurant with archaeological tour guide Maria Paula Loy, who has offered to share with them some of Sardinia's local legends.
How are you? Ciao, nice to meet you. Welcome to Sardinia.
That's it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good.
Did you go to the museum?
We did.
Oh, yeah. Tell me what you think about the finds that are displayed there.
I mean, up until about 6 months ago, I had no idea about these statues here. So now, when I saw these statues of the Giganti for the first time, not only did the eyes remind me of C-3PO from Star Wars, but also there are these giant-eyed statues in Tel Asmar from the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian times.
Originally, the archaeologists and also scholars who mentioned the Nuragic civilization said that these people probably arrived from Mesopotamia. So the Anunnaki,
Right. The Anunnaki, the race of winged giants as described in ancient Sumerian texts and frequently depicted on the temples and icons of ancient Babylon.
There are a lot of connections between the Sardinian language and the different languages of Mesopotamia, suggesting that Sumerians did actually come to Sardinia. They would have brought with them the traditions to do with the Anunnaki, the gods of heaven and earth, which many people believe were celestial beings.
What's interesting about the Anunnaki is that there's all types of wall reliefs which depict the Anunnaki standing amongst the other Sumerian human beings. They're always depicted as larger beings of great stature. Even in Sardinia, these various statues of giants could be actually depicting the Anunnaki.
I'm getting goosebumps. This leads me to the next question. Are you aware of any ancient legends of giants here on Sardinia?
oh yes. The name giant recalls in the name of the giant tombs, in the name of the giant statues, and also the type of architecture, cyclopean.
So to the observer, only a Cyclops could have built this wall, and that's why they
That's
call
the
it.
legend behind it.
Yeah, okay.
The Cyclops are, of course, the mythological giants that are mentioned by Homer in the Odyssey.
Yes.
In the epic Greek poem, the Odyssey, written by Homer in the 8th century BC, the hero, Odysseus, encounters a Cyclops named Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant who lives on an island with others of his kind. According to legend, Polyphemus was also part divine, as he was the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea.
So the Cyclops are a legendary race. The most famous one, of course, is Odysseus fights one in the Odyssey. They are extraordinarily large creatures, humanoid,
course, and famously with the single eye. A lot of the Greeks believed that towers were invented by them, actually.
There are some fascinating structures in parts of Greece that are massive. Cyclops were one-eyed giants, and it was thought that they were the only ones strong enough to lift these massive boulders and put them into place. No mortar.
I'm always curious, what was the true origin? What was the original spark of inspiration? What happened?
That's what we seek, huh?
Yes, yeah, that's the ultimate quest. The next day, Giorgio and Marty traveled to the remote town of City to visit a place known as Sidormo Isorku, a tomb of the giants. It is one of more than 800 similar structures on the island.
These stones are getting close to the ones you were describing from other sites.
We're talking a minimum, I would say, between 4 and 6 ton here.
Maybe 4 and 12.
Joining them is their archaeological guide, Ivan Amalu.
What I find interesting here is that the largest blocks are situated on top. It would make more sense to have the big blocks at the bottom and then the smaller blocks. So this right here requires some type of lever mechanism.
Yes.
What does the engineer in you say about this?
It's incredibly impressive. It would require many motivated people over a long time.
So what is the name of this?
The name of this is called the giant tomb, and the name is Sidormo Isorku.
And what does that mean?
Sidormo, the house, Isorku, the oak.
So this is considered a giant's tomb. Have any bones been found inside?
In many others, yes, not in this one, unfortunately.
Although no bones have been discovered within Sidormo Isorku, many of the 800 tombs on Sardinia were found to contain ancient human remains.
We found remarkably few human remains in these tombs. Perhaps in the 800 tombs themselves, we found maybe 100 skeletons of people. So either the bones were removed from the other ones, or they were just never used.
Archaeologists of the world will contend that the tombs of the giants in Sardinia could not possibly have been built for giants because the bodies of giants simply couldn't fit into the tombs. They weren't big enough. I personally went there, measured the tombs myself. Even in the smaller tombs, you could fit a 9 to 12 foot giant. But they're missing the point. Instead, the body of the giant was buried beneath the tomb, and then the edifice was raised over the burial of the giant.
There are quite a few accounts of giants throughout Sardinia and many traditions, especially because of the giants' tombs that exist all over the country. For example, in 1953, it's reported that 2 over 8 foot tall skeletons were discovered in that area, with grave goods and bronze furnishings and other such things actually within the tomb itself, suggesting that indeed giants did exist in Sardinia.
You know, it's really fascinating that this is considered a giant's structure because this is not the only one. Your neighboring island, Malta, has stories of giants. Greece has stories of the Cyclops, which were also giants. You can go to South America. Tiwanaku is considered to have been built by giants. So worldwide, we have these stories of giants. So the idea that at some point giants roamed the land, one has to wonder, were they at some point all the same beings?
Enough talking. Let's go have a look inside this way.
I had no idea of the amazing things that would await me on the island. These megalithic structures, the tombs of the giants, have become one of the biggest puzzle pieces that I've encountered so far.
Wow, very impressive.
Look at the beautiful construction. And look at the block. You see the big block on top?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the heaviest we do have here. So about the 12 tons and something.
So this block right here is estimated to be about 12 tons.
12 tons.
Wow. And also, this
what some may refer to as some type of an altar or a niche.
That was probably something for votive offerings or maybe ritual.
I believe that some of the tombs were designed for what the neurologic culture called the rite of incubation. Megalithic edifices were raised over the bodies of the giants that were buried beneath. And then during the rite of incubation, the young people would crawl inside of the tombs, and then they would spend the night. And the purpose was that these young people would incubate in order to absorb the power, the prowess, the might of the entities that were buried beneath the tombs. The mighty ones, the heroes, the giants.
So actually they put a lot of attention in the shape.
This definitely was pre-planned.
Here's what we can all agree on. Whoever built this had a very strong inspiration and or motivation.
Yes.
Did a race of colossal beings really inhabit the island of Sardinia centuries ago? And if so, were their origins earthly or extraterrestrial? Scattered throughout Western Europe are more than 10,000 standing stones known as menhirs. They are believed to date back to prehistoric times, although their purpose remains a mystery. Sardinia is home to hundreds of these menhirs, and ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos believes they may provide a key to understanding the island's history. To this end, he and Oak Island treasure hunter Marty Lagina have arranged to meet with archaeological guide Ivana Malu at the Menhir Museum in Laconia.
Look at the very strange circle with the spear. What do you think, Marty? What is that?
I'm not sure what that is, and I'm not sure what this is either. Now you tell me, please, what should I be seeing?
It's a guy going down to go into another dimension. Do not ask me where or which are the world. But he's going on a trip, on a journey, going from point A to point B.
Whatever it really symbolizes, it was very important. This took an enormous amount of work. Just this, I mean, it's very heavy. It's done in relief, which is the hard way to do a carving.
I think it's,
What do you think that represents?
we have people with two wings on each side. You know, it's almost like an early version of some type of an angel. I'm arguing that what we are looking at here is someone visiting from the sky. In the Bible, they were referred to as the Watchers.
The Watchers, the so-called fallen angels as referred to in the Bible's Old Testament. According to the book of Daniel, as well as in the apocryphal books of Enoch, God sent a group of angels referred to as the Watchers down to earth to watch over mankind. But the Watchers went against God's will and impregnated human women, producing a race of giant mutants known as Nephilim.
They were called the mighty ones of old. They were visible giants, and they brought havoc and destruction on the earth. And this is what led to God's decision to bring the flood. Even though the Bible teaches us that Noah and his family were the only humans to survive the flood, ancient legends teach us that there were others who did survive in many other places.
When we talk about the term Nephilim, it is associated with genetic hybrid entities. What this translates to me is that they were part extraterrestrial. Part of that story involves the Great Flood. So it's also possible that they decided to set up new cannons beyond the ones that were destroyed. So we have to wonder if Sardinia perhaps was a refuge for the Nephilim.
You know what I find beyond fascinating is this shape down here, which mainstream archaeology suggests is some type of a weapon, some type of a dagger, which makes perfect sense. But in conjunction with this symbol right here and that, one could argue
that this is a representation of some type of misunderstood technology that illustrates some type of a flying craft. Is it possible that the figures found on Sardinia's menhirs represent not angels sent from heaven, but extraterrestrial visitors? Beings that came in spaceships from another world and then fathered a race of giants. To see if there might be some compelling physical evidence to support the theory that Sardinia was once home to a race of extraterrestrial giants,
Hello, sir.
Giorgio and Marty have decided to take a look at the oldest structure on the island, the way extraterrestrials might have viewed it. From the sky.
Shows you that this is very well and the extraterrestrials here.
Giorgio, here it is.
The stepped pyramid, known as Monte Dakoti, was built around 4000 BC. But what purpose it served remains a mystery.
Does it remind you of anything you've seen before? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, this looks like some type of a stepped pyramid, almost like a ziggurat, which you can find in Mesopotamia, which is very interesting because how is it possible that we have a stepped pyramid here in Mesopotamia? And also, even closer, you have something similar in the Canary Islands on the island of Tenerife. Archaeologists have discovered that the original structure of Monte Dakoti was completely covered with a layered mixture of earth and stone around 2800 BC, and that the platform underneath has evidence of being exposed to fire. This has led some ancient astronaut theorists to speculate that it may have served a unique purpose for extraterrestrial visitors.
It could be that in the ancient past, maybe these sites were actually used as some type of loading dock for spacecraft. The platform on top is specifically situated to hold some type of large craft, and the ramp was used to possibly load and unload supplies. So we have to wonder if this ancient ziggurat wasn't actually some type of ancient space platform.
Is it possible that we have a step